So it took a little while to get organised, but now I've got one, a MyEnergi Zappi, to charge a Tesla. Right, so in this video I'm going to talk a little bit about the MyEnergi Zappi, why I chose it, who installed it, and how I'm getting on with it after a few days. So I think I mentioned this in previous videos. So I recently got a Tesla Model S, and obviously I can charge that with the Tesla charger that comes with it. It's only a 3-pin plug, so you plug it into the mains and you get 2 kilowatts an hour. So even though that's probably okay for the kind of limited mileage I do, it still takes a long time to charge up overnight. Not so long that it's not usable for me, but with the economy 4 tariff I have with Octopus Go, it means that I'm charging outside of that kind of period of time. So if I start charging at 12:30 until 4:30 in the morning, I get that 5 pence per kilowatt, but then it tends to finish charging maybe about 7 o'clock in the morning. So there's a few hours where I'm paying kind of 3 times as much. So basically about 15 pence per kilowatt, where I don't need to. So I decided already that I wanted to get the Zappi, and one of the reasons why I wanted the MyEnergi Zappi was specifically because it has that ability to utilize surplus solar power as well as just pulling from the grid. It works very similar to the Eddy, which I spoke about before. So it works really well with my solar setup and everything. And it gives the ability to provide up to 7 kilowatts of power. So I tend to use right now, depending where I go, somewhere between 9 to 12 kilowatts in terms of driving in the car. So to be able to obviously provide the power at 7 kilowatts, in an hour and a half the car has kind of returned to the 80% state of charge I looked for overnight, costing me only 5 pence per kilowatt. So this is why I wanted it. So my original plan, as kind of mentioned before, if you looked at some of my solar videos, was to go with Forever Green Energy. They're the people that installed my Powerwall, they're the people that installed my solar array, and I have been happy with the service provided from them. When I contacted them, they've been really busy, so they couldn't come out, I think until like May time, I think is what they said. So I was like, oh, I really don't want to wait that long. So I went onto the MyEnergi website, and if you go on there, you can click the button that says help me find an installer, and then basically what it does is obviously find the people that have the knowledge and partnering with MyEnergi to be able to install the Zappi. And also what was important to me is I wanted someone that I could utilize the OLEV grant in a quite straightforward manner. So if you're not familiar with the OLEV grant, right now, at the time of recording here in the UK, if your car is eligible, and there's a list on the government website, the government will give you £500 towards the charger. So hopefully if you choose I guess an installer that is kind of OLEV compatible, they will take care of requesting that £500 from the government, so you don't have to kind of pay all up front and then make the request back. So I found, I think it's about 5 or 6 different companies on the MyEnergi website that are kind of in my general area, and I reached out to all of them asking them, you know, this is what I'm looking for. I already have MyEnergi Harvey. So all I basically want is someone to come and install and supply a Zappi. Out of those 5 or 6 companies, 3 of them I had absolutely kind of no follow-up response from. So they said they're going to come out and give quotes, or they were going to follow up. Someone was going to ring me. No response whatsoever. Another company just kind of randomly started to contact me on WhatsApp. I don't use WhatsApp, but I do have it installed on my phone for something I was doing kind of before Christmas. And they just kind of randomly contacted me asking strange questions on there. Then I did have a follow-up conversation with this company called ACIS Energy, who I actually chose to do the install in the end, and someone else again who was going to come out and give me a quote, but they never turned up. So I went with ACIS Energy. A guy called Alan runs that, and he uses a guy that's quite local to me actually called Richard Payne, who's an electrician. And so they did a great install. The only thing I will say is I don't know if it's, I wouldn't say my install was particularly complex. We'll go through that in a moment. But if you look on, I think on the MyEnergi website, it says that an install is typically somewhere between 290 to 340 pounds. Initial kind of quote I had from ACIS Energy was 340 pounds, which was pretty good. But the total price I ended up having to pay in the end was 575 pounds. I was charged a £40 survey fee, which I wasn't aware of. And initially I was kind of like, oh, £575, that's quite a lot more than I was originally looking to pay, like 40% more. But in the end I just decided that I would go with additional cost for 2 reasons. One, I was really frustrated with being messed around by these other companies, and so ACIS Energy at least had followed up. Richard had come out and done a good survey, and he seemed like a really good guy. So I thought I'd kind of just go ahead and pay that a little bit more instead of just messing around for however many more weeks and months to try and sort something else out. So keep that in mind. I would recommend ACIS Energy in terms of the install I had. Richard was very thorough and did a really neat and considerate job. So that's really important to me. The way he's done the cabling and everything is much better, I think, than the cabling I had like for the solar. And really good kind of follow-up. He's a really nice guy, he's into cars and stuff as well, so that was really good. And Alan, who owns the company, also came out on the day they installed just to check everything, and they took care of the OLEV grant money and everything. So the total cost to me was the £575, and then they claimed the additional £500 from the government. So in terms of my install, my original plan was to have this installed on my garage wall and connected into my garage where all the rest of the solar stuff is and the power wall and everything. But looking at my current electricity consumption here in the cave, it was a bit questionable as if it was going to be right. If the cabling between my house and the cave, which is 10mm cable, what we're charging the Twizy and trying to charge the Tesla and the Powerwall and the panel heaters and stuff I have in here. So it was advised that I would have some armoured cabling run from my house round the side of the house and have the Zappi installed on the side of the house instead of the garage. So not exactly what I wanted initially, but actually it works out quite well. Like I say, he didn't install. The only issue I have right now, it's not really an issue, but I have the cable obviously trailing across the drive a little bit because I park on the right hand side, but I'm sure at some point in the future my wife will get an electric vehicle, then it will actually be a lot easier for us both to charge. But I still went with the 8-meter cabled Zappi just to make sure we have enough length. So as you can see in the video, I had a couple of things done which kind of increased the cost. So I think it's about 15 meters of armoured cable run along the side of the house from my main fuse board all along the front the house. It's all kind of nicely buried under stones, so you can't really see it. There is a rather large I don't know what you call it, it's like a box that kind of goes from the armoured trunking to the unarmoured cabling into trunking in the house for the fuse box. So I think the plan is we get a nice pot. We've already got some, and put a plant in there to see that. Everything runs around under the stones, you can't really see it. A really nice kind of combination of the armoured trunking and some plastic trunking with a 90-degree angle going down and around the side of the house. And also because I have a metal light fitting on the outside, I had an additional earth rod installed, and my kind of house kind of re-earthed in a way, which added a bit of the extra cost, but it was all done really neatly. And had the Zappi installed, I configured it and linked it to my Harvey and installed the little holster and everything, and everything was really good. So I'm happy, and I've paid the money for that. So now let's talk about the Zappi itself. So far so good. My Zappi, I think, was is like it's original generation, but I think it'd been sat on the shelf for quite a while. I don't think the 8-meter Zappis are as common. So as a result of that, I have quite old firmware, version 1.26 firmware, which is similar to what I had on my Eddies. I think this was manufactured about August 2018, something like that. So that does create not a proper problem, but there are some kind of oddities, especially if you've got a power wall and stuff like that, because it's not quite kind of set up to work really nicely with the battery. But things are working well, and I'm going through this process of updating it with the hub to put the latest firmware on. Then things will work really nicely like I do with my Eddy. So yes, it's working well. There hasn't really been much solar generation since I've had Zappi installed. I did do a slight period where I turned the power off to see how it did the diversion. Again, I'm not sure if it's a firmware issue, but I did have some situation where even then when I turned the power back on, I think I need to do some more configuration because it was still supply power and charging to the car as opposed to rediverting back to the battery. I think that's where the newer firmware has ability to do better priorities for battery charging and that sort of thing. So predominantly most of the time I've been charging in the evening, or I guess early morning, on the ACIS Go tariff. So I've configured a boost timer to enable that to be charging the car in between 12:30 and 4:30 in the morning, which is working really well. Every morning I get up, the car is fully charged to 80%, and away I go. So as I mentioned already, so the Zappi is capable of supplying up to 7 kilowatts, 30 amps of power, and that's kind of in its fast charging mode. So that's basically where it just pulls from the grid and charge a maximum kilowatt it can. It then has an eco mode and an eco plus mode. If you have an eco mode, what it will do is it will use a combination of solar and the grid, but will only ever pull, I think it's 1.4 or 1.24. I'll put a little note below to make sure my number is right. It'll only pull that minimum number from the grid and then boost anything else, or take that extra surplus from the solar. And this number is specific to how electric vehicles are configured, so it's like the minimum number of kilowatts that a car can take to kind of have the charging cycle happen. And even if whether you have the Eco Plus set as your kind of default setting, in your boost timer it will automatically default to fast and give the full 7 kilowatts, which is really good. Then if you have Eco Plus mode, this will only utilize solar. So unless there's any solar surplus above a certain threshold, which obviously means you've got to have at least at 1 point whatever kilowatts it is surplus to enable the car to charge, and it will stop and start the charge as you see fit. So that's kind of the general basics of it. There's various different levels of boost. There's like smart boost, which I think allows you to configure that you want the car to have a certain amount of kilowatts in it by the end of the day, so it might be do 10 kilowatts from solar, but you wanted 15 kilowatts, so overnight it will put another 5 kilowatts in, because that's what you've kind of defined it as. There's a few things that you can do there. There's also this eSense feature, I think it's called, where if you have like an agile tariff where the cost of electricity is fluctuating depending on demand and availability, it can kind of hook into that to kind of be able to charge your car based on changes in rate of electricity grid, which is really good. And a bit like the Eddy, it's got various kind of features, so you can see kind of how much charging history you've had and how much of that history came from the grid or came from solar and what have you, so you can kind of keep a track of what you're doing there. Then I think, what else is there? So as I mentioned before, when you're setting this up, it comes with a CT clamp, and that CT clamp you kind of normally would connect to your grid connection, so it can kind of understand if there's any surplus and everything like that. I obviously, having already had the Eddy, I have a connection to the grid, to my solar generation and my battery, which is why on the screen I can see a picture of how much solar generation I'm having with the sun, how much the house is using, and then obviously the grid as well, which gives me a little bit more kind of clarity on the screen. There's also an ability to lock the Zappi down, so it requires a PIN number. So that basically just means if you're worried about someone kind of rocking up to your house and just pulling off and charging, and you want to kind of protect against that, then you can lock things down. So I don't feel the need to do that because my house is quite well hidden and I've got no particular plans or concerns to worry about that, but it is a feature that is available. So I think that's the main things. I guess the other thing to note is this is a generation 1 Zappi that I've had installed, and basically there's a new version coming out anytime now. I do prefer the look and the style of that. They do a black version, it's like a matte black finish, which looks really nice. But I was already kind of waited like nearly 3 weeks to kind of get an installer for the Zappi. I didn't want to wait any longer because it was just kind of getting frustrating to me to be charging off the 3-pin all the time. So the first generation Zappi is already a good product. And really the main difference between the current Zappi and the new one, apart from aesthetics, is, as I mentioned, I've had to have this earth rod installed and what have you. The new Zappi has various kind of new features inside of it to make it compatible with the new kind of regulations. It also makes it easier to install, which means the install cost will be a bit less. The actual cost of the product is higher, so it probably kind of works out to be about the same. And just trying to think if there's anything else that's worth noting with that. Oh, I guess the only thing to mention, just in case you are obviously holding off, so right now with the generation 1 Zappi, obviously you can buy it with a type 1 or type 2 end on it and a 5 meter or an 8 meter cable. The next generation Zappi only comes with, I think, a 6.5 meter cable. So for someone like me, I think 6.5 meters would have been fine, but if you need 8 meters, for example, then you really still want to go with the generation 1 Zappi. Now I don't know if MyEnergi will maintain the option that you can buy an 8 meter cable in addition. So I know that right now, if you bought a 5 meter version of the Zappi and perhaps you moved and took that with you and then you needed more length, you can buy an 8 meter cable and have it connected. But yeah, so something to keep in mind. And so like I say, I'm really happy with it. I want to get the firmware updated so it kind of works really nice and smoothly. But if you didn't know about this already, MyEnergi is soon to be releasing this hub more officially, and I'll be reviewing one of those on the channel when they do. Talk a little bit about that. The only thing that's a little bit frustrating, it's not a frustration with the Zappi itself. Other, like the McKenzie Type 2 cable I have that comes with the Tesla, is on the end of the plug it has this kind of rubber bung, I guess, to stop water getting in there. Obviously if you're using the holster or when you've got it plugged into the car, that means that rubber is kind of hanging around. And to me it's a little bit frustrating because it kind of bangs on the paintwork, and when it's windy it's kind of moving forward, so I try and hoop it and loop it up, but I don't want to cut it off. But yeah, it's sometimes a little bit tricky to get in and out of the supplied holster, but in general it seems to work pretty well. And like I said, I really wanted a black one, but maybe you can do something with the current one to make it black, but that's something for a different video. But I recommend the MyEnergi Zappi. Really right now, if you want something that can automatically utilize surplus solar, there isn't really anything. I think Solar Edge do one that's kind of integrated into their inverter, but that is meaning you have to charge in your garage, whereas obviously with the Zappi you have that installed in your garage or outside of your garage. And there's companies like Rolex and stuff like that that do these chargers that are slightly cheaper, but again, currently that no ability to kind of automatically use a solar. And that's what I like most about my current setup, is it kind of manages itself. So solar is generated, it goes into the power wall. When the power wall is full, it it then uses a surplus to heat the water with the eddy, and then after that it will utilize the surplus to charge the car. And the reason I've gone that route is because the power wall takes a reasonable amount of time to charge up. We don't tend to use a lot of hot water, so it tends to need about 6 kilowatts to kind of reheat our water that we need. So that's kind of done typically in an hour or so when we've got a good solar day, and then there's plenty of surplus hopefully then to go into the car. But if there isn't, then I can just take some energy from the power wall. So for me right now, that's how I've currently got things set up. So power wall, eddy, and then Zappi. And if things kind of change different over the summer, I can kind of flip that around a bit. Perhaps it'd be power wall, Zappi, eddy, or something, because I can obviously heat the water from the gas if I want. But long video, but I thought I'd explain to you why I went with this product, and hopefully it's helpful to you. So yeah, that's it. The MyEnergi Zappi Generation 1. Thanks for watching this video. A thumbs up would be really appreciated. If you're interested in other geek type videos, please consider subscribing to Spectrum Geeks. Why not also follow us on Facebook, Instagram and Twitter. And before you leave, why don't you check out one of these other videos that may be of interest. Thanks again for watching.